Many people see cafe ownership as an escape, a dream of exposed brick, sunlit mornings, and chatting with regulars while pulling a perfect flat white. That vision is real, but it often ignores the financial mechanics that dictate whether the doors stay open. Let's look at the number that draws most people into the business: the retail cost of a single drink. For a specialty latte priced at $5, the raw ingredients, the beans, the milk, the syrup, and the packaging, cost between 70 and 90 cents. That represents an 85% gross margin on every drink sold. To put that in context, a typical grocery store operates on a gross margin of 25%. Even a highly profitable software company targets 80%. A cafe achieves these numbers every time the espresso machine runs. Yet, despite these margins, between 50 and 74% of independent coffee shops fail within their first 5 years. Most first-time owners dedicate their energy to the coffee and the atmosphere, but the high failure rate suggests that those variables aren't the primary drivers of longevity. The difficulty lies in the transition from that 85. In the US, this construction runs between $80 and $150 per square foot, meaning a standard unit can cost $180,000 before you buy a single bean. The equipment list adds another layer of cost. A premium 2-group espresso machine alone can cost $22,000, followed by high-end grinders, refrigeration, and point-of-sale systems. On top of that, landlords often require several months of rent as a security deposit before you even get the keys to begin renovations. When you add up the construction, equipment, and deposits, the total startup cost for a mid-size independent cafe typically lands between $150,000 and $250,000. But that isn't the final number. Most cafes take 6 to 18 months to reach profitability, meaning you need a reserve of working capital to cover bills during the ramp-up. Budgeting an additional $60,000 to $100,000 in cash is a necessity. Without this buffer, a shop is vulnerable to any slow month in its first year of operation. Exhausting a budget on aesthetic upgrades while ignoring the working capital reserve often leaves a business unable to survive its own growth phase. Once the doors are open, that 85% margin on your lattes meets the reality of daily overhead. This chart shows the journey of a single dollar of revenue. The first 30 cents are immediately consumed by labor costs, the single largest expense for any cafe. Labor is a fixed reality. You must staff the bar regardless of whether the morning is busy or the afternoon is silent. For a specialty cafe to remain viable, labor costs must stay within a tight window of 28 to 35% of total revenue. Dropping below 25% usually leads to a decline in service speed and quality, which damages customer retention. However, if labor creeps above 38%, the business typically loses money even when it is full of customers. This tolerance is becoming even tighter as rising minimum wages across many states put constant upward pressure on payroll. Maintaining this ratio is a constant balancing act that determines the financial health of the shop every single week. After labor, the remaining margin is further reduced by rent. In a well-optimized model, rent should account for roughly another 12 cents of every dollar. There is a strict ceiling on this number that most successful owners refuse to cross. If a lease consumes more than 14% of revenue, the business model collapses. Because leases are often locked in for 5 years, an expensive rent rate creates a structural deficit that is almost impossible to grow out of. This makes the perfect location a potential trap. High-traffic corner units often carry price tags that exceed that 14% ceiling, regardless of how many people walk by. This rent pressure is compounded by the fact that a cafe's revenue is not distributed evenly throughout the day. This graph shows a typical daily revenue cycle. There is a massive spike between 7 a.m. and noon, where the shop might generate 40% of its total daily sales. After the morning rush, shops enter a dead zone. Revenue drops significantly, yet the fixed costs of rent and labor remain at 100%. Profitable cafes solve this by creating secondary revenue streams, like food programs, retail merchandise, or evening events, to justify the overhead during these slow afternoon hours. The location you choose essentially locks in your highest fixed cost, while defining your ability to generate sales outside of the morning peak. When you combine labor, rent, cost of goods, and maintenance, the final picture of cafe ownership becomes clear. That initial 85% margin on a single latte eventually compresses down to a net profit of between 5 and 15% of total revenue. For those who understand these ratios, there are two primary paths. The neighborhood Nook typically costs about $150,000 to open, and if managed correctly, yields an annual net profit of roughly $30,000. This model relies heavily on the owner working behind the bar. It is a stable lifestyle business, but it offers limited room for scaling without significant changes to the space or the menu. The urban flagship requires more capital, often $400,000, but utilizes a full kitchen and high volume to reach $100,000 in annual profit. The flagship model offers a much higher ceiling, but its success depends on the precise management of complex systems and a much larger staff. Regardless of the path, the most successful owners prioritize their financial models over the aesthetics of the shop. Given the tight tolerances, this industry is not suitable for everyone. Surveys of former owners show that a lack of preparation for operational complexity, not bad coffee, is the leading cause of failure. Entering this business without a 6-month capital reserve is a high-risk gamble. The ideal owner is someone who manages labor ratios to the percentage point, secures rent under 12%, and builds a system to capture revenue throughout the entire day. Ultimately, the shops that thrive are those built on a foundation of precise financial modeling and strict operational control.